Welcome into another edition of the Future Sox podcast. You've got Elijah Evans and my co-host Dylan Barnas today. I'm back from Arizona. Spring training is off and running. We are 3 days out from the start of the World Baseball Classic, which is crazy, and about 3 weeks and change out from the start of the regular MLB season. So we're fired up. It's a good time of year. I am a little bit burnt, but had a great trip, and it was a really good time to get to be on the backfields. A lot of sun for sure, but got a ton of good looks across the board at White Sox, major league guys, prospects, a lot of insights from people within the organization. So I know I had an earlier episode with Ian that we recorded Friday night, late at night, just to get out some notes on some prospects. But now we're going to do kind of a more deeper dive into the status of the roster and the prospects. I got to see closer looks and hear stuff about, and just really everything unpacked. And Dylan's going to help me kind of talk through all the different layers to stuff that's going on.
Yeah, no, it's going to be really fun, a really fun episode today because you got some great intel out in Arizona, and I'm just going to be here giving my thoughts on everything that you're going to say, and hopefully I can give some better analysis than just you saying the info and me trying to take a 5,000-foot view at everything. But yeah, no, it seemed like you got a lot of really good intel out there in Arizona, and some of the stuff like it could be pretty significant for just the future of a lot of these guys in the White Sox minor league system, because spring training is where you can really turn heads. Like, yeah, it's not real baseball. It doesn't really matter. But like a good spring combined with a solid start to the year, that can really help a player get on the right track towards being an everyday prospect and putting their names on the map for guys who haven't yet.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. It's an important time. It really is. It might not seem like it's, make or break, and it's not make or break. Everything can change, of course, but like this matters. And the impression that some of these young guys are making on the big league coaching staff and the front office, right? Like those things come into play. It's very clear, even from just, being at Will Venable's press conferences the past handful of days. Like these things matter. It really does. And it's cool to see like him even reflecting and being like, yeah, like this guy's made a huge impact on me in his first big league camp. Like, there's a lot of guys where it's like, okay, yeah, I've really gotten to know this player on a personal level from being in the major league clubhouse, but also just on the field. It's like Venable doesn't have, of course he knows who these guys are, but he doesn't have the time. And none of these coaches do at the big league level to watch minor league guys every day throughout the year and keep track of everything they're doing. They're focused on an entire, 26-man staff at the big league level. So for them, it's a really good opportunity to just get to know these guys and see what they're all about, see how they go through their motions every day, and just learn what the team's all about. So it seems like we're due for our first round of cuts here this week. So we are going to get WBC guys went out. So, you had 5 guys leave the locker room, which does kind of help a little bit in terms of,
Right.
the busyness in that major league locker room. It's pretty crazy the first few weeks. It's packed in there. It's definitely a little crowded in the big league
I can
locker room
imagine.
out of the gate there when you've got a full camp of guys. And then there's the temporary lockers that are in the middle of the locker room, sort of that get moved out of there once they cut 1 or 2 rounds of players, and then there's a few less guys in there. A lot of those lockers are some of the young pitchers, some of the young guys who are young prospects who are definitely not going to make the team, and kind of know that, right? I think some of these guys already it's already been told to the trio of pitchers in Tanner McDougal, Noah Schultz, and Hagen Smith, like they've already been told they're not making the team. It is kind of an onset thing of just like, hey, you're not going to be on the team, but at the same time, like there is a ton of buzz around these guys, and things change, right? Like
Yeah.
last year Grant Taylor was told he wasn't going to be up for a while, and little do you know, it was, hey, we're going to put you in the bullpen. 3 weeks later, hey, you're coming up to the bigs, right? Things change, stuff happens, and that's what makes spring training and this time of year so fun to just cover and get excited about.
Yeah, and even without like the whole Grant Taylor shifting into the bullpen and then being up later on in the season, guys get hurt. Last spring there
Yeah,
were
of
6
course.
Tommy Johns in spring training for the White Sox, and you obviously aren't hoping that guys get hurt and so that another arm can take their place. But injuries are a very real part of baseball today, especially Tommy John. It feels like
Yep.
every organization has at least 2 guys on the shelf recovering from Tommy John at any given time. So
Yep.
the fact that the White Sox have this sort of gluttony of arms that are sort of jockeying for position in terms of who gets called up first, that's a good thing. And, at the end of the day, I expect all 3 of them to become big league caliber pitchers in the very near future, if not like in the case of
Yeah.
Tanner McDougal in like about a month or so. But,
Yeah.
Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith, they might have a little bit more time to get fully up to speed and MLB ready, but I think that both of them are easily MLB caliber pitchers this year. It depends on when, but I think both of them can be up this year. And I wouldn't say it's a disappointment if neither of them are, but like I think that both of them have the talent
It
to
will be.
pitch out of a MLB bullpen
Yeah.
or in the starting rotation this year.
Completely, yeah. I want to take a step back first. I want to go in downward order, and I think the easiest way
Yeah.
to talk through. There's just so many names to talk through. Going through kind of likely big league roster guys, taking it down then to the big league camp prospects like those guys and a number of others we're going to mention. Brady Montgomery, Sam Antonacci, both having really awesome springs and getting unbelievable reviews from the coaching staff. I will say the two of those guys, like the coaches and just the organization just has spoken so glowingly of those two out of camp these first 2 weeks, just about their ethic, their obviously their skills, but also just the way those guys carry themselves in the big league locker room and just the way that they kind of approach the game. Really good reviews. But starting at the big league level, then we'll work our way down at the end to some
And
of the
get,
lower
get a
level
little bit more
prospects.
fun.
We got some niche guys here, folks. I know if you've been following my Twitter feed here the past week and some of the things I've been putting out, got some really interesting looks at some guys and players that, you may not know much about. I don't know much about, and I got to learn about a little bit more this week. Some really fun guys down at the lower levels of the system, and I think particularly on the international side, it seems more encouraging than it has in quite some years. Honestly, we knew there's been some changes on that side of things, so we'll get to some of those guys at the end of the episode. Starting at the big league level, definitely some interesting just dynamics with the roster that I want to touch on out of the gate because I did get to feel out the vibe and hear it and talk to people and kind of just see where things are at from a roster construction standpoint. Um, Starting on the offensive side, I don't know if Everson Pereira is going to be ready for opening day. It seems to me like the injury's taken a bit. Obliques, for those who know, like that, they're just an annoying injury. It's
Yeah.
never something that gets that serious, but it's usually something that takes longer than you want it to heal. We've seen that with a lot of guys around Major League Baseball, White Sox and not White Sox the past couple years.
Yeah.
So that creates an interesting layer where if Pereira doesn't make the roster, you've got a spot that's pretty wide open for the taking. It does seem like if they're going to be another outfielder beyond, Brooks Baldwin and Luis Angel Acuna, like at this point, they're going to be on the roster, it seems like. Obviously, in addition to the veterans and Andrew Benintendi and Austin Hayes, if there's going to be a fifth outfielder on this roster, it does seem like Jared Kelenic has the edge for that spot right now, given his status, given his former pedigree as a high level prospect. It sounds to me like if Pereira is not ready for opening day, that spot is more likely Kelenic's than anybody else's.
I struggle on whether or not the White Sox will carry a fifth outfielder just because you've got guys like Acuna and Baldwin where they can play all over the field, but they're probably going to be in the outfield at least to start the year, and they're probably best utilized there in terms of like the overall construction of the current team right now. But
Right.
it wouldn't shock me to see a fifth outfielder get carried just because you have guys like Andrew Benintendi and Austin Hayes who they need to get off their feet a couple days a week, and maybe it's the same day for both of them, and one of them, or you need somebody else to slide over to right field and play, just be a warm body out there. So
Yeah.
Kelenic hasn't been off to like the greatest starts. He's been hitting the ball a little bit harder than I think we both expected. I think we mentioned that last week, but it's really not about results with Kelenic. I think that if he can just get back to, I don't want to say the confidence and swagger that he had when he was coming up through the minor leagues, but like just being himself and learning how to like come from like sort of be the underdog and prove everybody wrong about him, where a lot of people have written him off and said that he's not going to be anything. But I think that a fifth outfielder is more likely if Andrew Benintendi is banged up and isn't ready for opening day. It sounds like he would have played through this injury, whatever
I'll
it
be
is. If
fine.
it was,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like he's going to be fine. But with Pereira, like an oblique, again, it's tough to come back to like fully 100% in a short manner of time. I'm not sure how bad he strained it, but like we haven't seen him in a spring training game, I don't think.
Yeah.
So
I haven't
it's
I didn't
it's
even
it's
see him
pretty,
taking backfield reps at all. So I think typically when
yeah,
those injuries happen, like I'd expect a guy within if they were gonna come back soon, I would expect within a week of the injury to be at least taking live ABs.
yeah,
And I didn't catch him with any live ABs, and he might have been in the lab. I'm not, I wasn't seeing everything at all times, but I
right.
didn't see him taking live at bats in the backfields. And it's a guy who hasn't gotten into games yet, right? Seems like he's a bit away. The last I heard on Saturday morning from Venable in terms of Benintendi was that they ruled out anything substantive for him. It's like, and the initial thing we'd heard is like the day of, it was like if this was an important game, he would have been playing. At the day of the injury, and then the day after, it was like, okay, he's going to take a couple days, and then he should be back out there. So
Yeah.
I don't know the severity. It might be, nagging him and not getting better, but it doesn't seem like he's at risk of not being ready for the season. I do think that he'll be there. The interesting wrinkle, though, is that like with Acuna and Baldwin both being secondary infielders potentially, that's where I think they will carry a fifth outfielder. That's why I do
Yeah.
believe that if Pereira is not ready, you're going to see somebody else, whether it be Kelnick or one of the AAA type of guys, you're going to see another outfielder. Is my best guess, just because I do expect, and it does sound like Acuna more than Baldwin. Actually, I talked to Brooks, and it sounds like from in the Baldwin regard, it seems like he is prepared to be a primary outfielder. That's been his goal. He's still taking reps at infield to stay sharp, but it does
Right.
seem like he's kind of been told like he's going to be an outfielder this year. Whereas Acuna, it sounds like the organization does value his ability to play middle infield, and I think he will not necessarily be a primary option there, but I still think he's going to get reps there throughout the season. In which case, if he's going to be getting any infield reps, to me that signals there's definitely going to be a fifth outfielder on the roster, whether it be Kelnick, Pereira, maybe a couple other guys that I think could
I f-
slide in there, but I
Derek
really
Hill
don't
isn't,
know. Derek Hill is the other one I was going to
maybe.
mention. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I can see Derek Hill because the defense is really strong. So I think
Yeah.
if Pereira's out and they decide, and Kelnick just doesn't do enough to make the roster, I could see Hill being the other guy. Also a guy without options, right? So another guy you have to put through waivers. So I think that does factor into the play there, where I could see Hill being the guy that makes that fifth outfielder spot purely as just a defense for first outfielder, to fill that spot, considering your two center fielders are also guys that haven't played center field for more than a year.
Right. Yeah.
I actually think that could be the likely outcome if it's not going to be Pereira or Kelnick at that point.
Yeah, especially because I feel like Baldwin has been getting more reps in the corners than center field, at least so far. I'm not
Right.
entirely sure on that. I could be wrong, but I feel like I've seen him in right field and maybe one game in left so far. But I think that if Hill is the guy, I think that he probably is the or he's probably only going to be playing center field, and then
Yep.
you've got Hayes in one corner, and then one of Baldwin, Benintendi, Acuna in the other corner. So,
Yep.
it's going to be interesting how the outfield shakes out because, I mean, we've been talking about the White Sox outfield and how, spots are up for grabs now. It feels like for about 5 years where, not a consistent right fielder and, haven't had like a, what is it? What was it? Or no, I'm thinking a second baseman where you haven't had like a
Yeah.
repeat opening day
Spin
starter for
starter.
a while. Yeah.
Right field's probably not that far off of that as that
Yeah.
record as well. So, I think that's kind of where the offense stands. On the the bench side, right? I think the Corey Lee and Curtis Mead conversations that we've had in the past are tricky because both guys have no options. I don't think it doesn't seem like they're necessarily scared to lose either of those guys. I think Lee is the harder one to stomach. With the depth of infield, like I'd say I almost expect Mead at this point to get put through waivers and see what happens. Maybe not. Maybe he ends up being that last infielder on the bench, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him get optioned and go through waivers. And I honestly think Curtis Mead could clear waivers potentially too, in which case he did just be in Charlotte as a depth guy. Corey Lee is a little bit of a trickier one because if you put him through waivers, he's going to get claimed. I think there's plenty of teams, and I think they know that too. At the end of the day, though, like he's a good presence in the locker room. It seems like a lot of guys like working with him. He's been around for a little while. He's the third catcher in this organization, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So that is where it gets a little tricky with Lee. And I think Drew Romo is a perfectly capable AAA
Right.
catcher and depth guy, right? So Corey Lee is a tough one because you either deal with having a third catcher on your roster and you kind of eat a bench spot, or you put him through waivers and just are prepared to lose him at that point. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with Lee. I wouldn't be surprised either direction at this point, but I could see it going either way, honestly, with Corey Lee.
The thing with both of them is, especially with Mead, I'm not sure how much left he has to prove in AAA. Like every time he gets sent down
No.
to AAA, he mashes the baseball, and maybe there's a team out there that can give him consistent everyday playing time. Maybe it's a team like the Nationals or the Cardinals or the Rockies, whoever, like a bad team who doesn't really have a future of like contending this year or next year. Maybe they take a chance on him. So I think that Mead would. I don't know. I feel like he could get lost to waivers, but it wouldn't shock me if he cleared and went to AAA. And then with Lee,
Yeah.
I feel like he does make the team just given how like the way that Venable was like working the lineup and bench last year. He really liked to use all three catchers in the same game, and not have the Texas incident where you have Tyler Alexander hitting in extra innings. So I'm not sure there. It could go either way, but it would not shock me at all to see Lee being one
Yeah,
of the four bench spots.
I guess my thing is like if for a team that's not a contender necessarily, like is it the worst case if you have one or two games in an entire season where you have to lose your DH because Edgar Carroll has to enter? I just don't I don't know
Yeah,
if that's
that's
like
fair.
I'm not sure I'm constructing my roster personally based on like a one or two game scenario from a 162 game season
Yeah,
and losing a bench spot that's not being used. To answer a question in the chat, like no chance are at this point. Kyle Teal and Edgar Carroll are catchers. Like
yeah,
they're not taking reps in the outfield. They're not going to take reps in the outfield. There's a world where maybe one of them takes right where Kyle Teal takes some first base reps, but now with Murakami, I don't think so. In which case,
right.
like they're catchers really at the end of the day. And Edgar Carroll, this to his credit, another guy that's having a great spring so far.
Yeah,
He's proving that he deserves to be in that DH spot at least 3 to 4 times a week if he's not going to be catching regularly, right?
I
So
would say more.
yeah, maybe more, right? I mean, the issue is that the fact that Benintendi is still going to be a guy that's expected to do some DHing, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. I do think Caro and Teal are going to get ample playing time. I wouldn't worry too much from the perspective of like they're not going to get playing time. At least Caro, right? I think is the one who kind of could get pushed to the side. I think he's going to get run. I think he's going to get 4 days a week at least in the lineup, which he deserves at this point. So we'll see how that shakes out. That's kind of where I'm at with the offense. It really, it seems like the majority of that lineup is set at this point. And then that just last bench spot or two, the Lee and Mead decisions, in addition to the Pereira injury, that's kind of just the layers to those final roster spots there. But it seems pretty set. Flipping over to the pitching side, so this is where it gets interesting because this whole like 9 starters in camp thing, from talking to Mike Vassell, from gauging it with him, like I wrote a piece, shameless plug here, everyone, but I wrote a piece on the bullpen as a whole. I got to talk to pretty much every reliever in the bullpen except for Sir Anthony, who I didn't get to catch up with, but got to talk with pretty much every other bullpen guy just about their role and what they're working on, and like Vassell is very, very comfortable with this Swiss Army role. Like more than anybody, he seems like he embraces this ability to just kind of plug and play wherever. That's a guy I think's in the bullpen. Sean Newcomb is an interesting one because I do think he said after his start the other day that like he likes the routine and the discipline of being in this 5 day schedule, even if it meant, a shorter spurt starts and then being able to relieve once in the week in between starts type of thing. Like I think there's a world. So the 5 guys that are the bulk starters will be the same 5 we expect, I believe, with Shane Smith, with Davis Martin, Anthony K, Eric Fetty, and Sean Burke. I do think there's a pretty decent chance that we get an opener situation for that 5th spot ahead of a Sean Burke potentially, and if not ahead of a Sean Burke, it even could be in somebody getting an opener spot instead of Eric Fetty being in the rotation. I think there is a possibility that happens. I think we were very quick to pencil in Fetty, given that he's a former starter with the team and got signed late, but like it's a $1.5 million signing. I
Right.
don't think Fetty's contract or pedigree is necessarily going to pencil him in. Interesting. I think there's a possibility where either a Newcomb or a Jetixon Paez that somebody just mentioned, or even, maybe it is sometimes just Vassal, right? Like there's a chance that there is an opener here in the 5 spot as opposed to either Sean Burke or Eric Fetty out of the gate. I still think the most likely outcome is just that initial 5 is the rotation, but I wouldn't be shocked to see the 5th spot be an opener, at least to start the year.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked either, especially given that they told Newcomb that he was going to get a chance to fight for a rotation spot, and maybe it's not the traditional rotation spot of like, okay, yeah, you're going to go 6 7 innings. I'm sorry, my brain is
Just,
fried.
just,
Clearly,
just get out
yeah,
of here,
I'm
man.
I'm, I'm going to go.
Just
Uh, Regardless, Sean Newcomb isn't like the traditional workhorse starter where he's going to go deep into games and like he's not going to be Tarek Skubal where he's going 8 innings every outing and looking like the best pitcher on the planet. And I think his best used role last year, or not even last year, but just like in his time in the past like season or two, it's been that sort of like bulk lefty reliever. And if he can do those bulk lefty innings at the start of the game instead of like in the middle of the game, I feel like he could do that perfectly fine. And
yeah,
then, like you said, have that one maybe 2 times in between those 5 days of just coming in to get 2 lefties out and
yeah.
then going to take a seat.
Right. I'd be interested. The issue with that and what I brought up in that bullpen piece I wrote for Just Baseball is like that's your only leverage lefty right now is Sean
Right.
Newcomb, right?
That's
So
tough.
when you're in a situation where that's the one guy that has the most somewhat proven, at least based on last year, like leverage experience as a left-hander, you're losing that valuable piece if you're having him open games potentially. So
Right.
I think it depends. I'm curious to see how it shakes out. I do think there's definitely going to be some interesting dynamics with this bullpen. Somebody just asked about Grant Taylor too. Like that was another piece. I just put up a feature this morning for justbaseball.com
Great
on
piece,
Grant
by the way.
Taylor, and thank you, I appreciate it, man. And it was fun to write because I got to talk to Taylor, and like the dude is gonna want to start.
Yeah.
He's a guy that loves competing like the best of them, and I do think that he wants to keep that door open. It's not just like,
Yeah.
oh, like down the road I wouldn't mind starting. Like he wants to keep that door open. But with that said, he's very cognizant of the fact that this year he's a reliever. He is going to be a reliever. He's ready to be a reliever, whether that means multiple innings or leverage. Like he's open to that no matter what, and he's going to do what it takes both ways. But like, I do think Grant Taylor, and I kind of detailed it in that piece. Like, there's a path where if you can get him into these it's not Mike Vassell because he's going to be a higher leverage arm than Vassell is,
Right.
but if he can be a guy that goes seventh, eighth inning, like if you're in a game where you get a quality sixth inning start and you're up 2 runs and Grant Taylor gives you 2 innings, leading it to hands it off to Sir Anthony Dominguez, like that's pretty
That's pretty
sick.
fun.
And I
That's
think
pretty fun.
it's fun, and I think it could make a lot of sense for him because it gives
Right.
him the experience of doing the up down with 2 innings. You build up his innings. He agreed when we were talking kind of like through like does getting to like 100 innings, like, does that kind of give you that like that longer term vision of being able to potentially start? And like it does, right? Because you can't just have him throw 60 innings this year and then say next year you're competing as a starter.
Right.
But if he gets to that 100, 105 innings as this multi-inning, versatile, dynamic 101 bullpen piece, there's a world where he could be a 150 inning starter next year, and it could work. And if he comes into camp and he stays healthy and he's able to get those innings built up, like it could make a lot of sense. So I loved talking to Taylor. He's a really fun dude to just pick the brain of and see what he's doing. He just started like playing with a two seam in playing catch this
And it's
offseason and was just
ridiculous.
like, he was just like, oh, like let me just mess around with a two seam. Started throwing it well and realized how good it was, and now it's like a weapon for him. And he's like, yeah, I want to use it more and more this season and really just be able to maximize it, balance it off my fastball. You're looking at a two seam that I know we talked about this the other day. Like you're looking at a two seam that's it's less vert and it goes from basically a zero horizontal, a straight on four seam that is just so sharp, and then a two seam that is the same or higher velo, but you add 10 inches of horizontal arm side movement. Like it's pretty ridiculous. And Taylor is someone like I loved kind of putting together my thoughts on that piece because I think he really is the best pitcher on this staff. I don't think
Yeah.
that's crazy to say. I think that a lot of people in the organization agree with me. Even the other guys like Jordan Hicks I talked to, he was like, I didn't realize what Grant Taylor was throwing until I just saw him get into camp and started seeing him
Yeah.
just pump 101s with the ridiculous off speed. And like he was like, yeah, like I didn't know exactly what that guy had in the tank. And then Kyle Deal told me that on the backfields last week, Grant Taylor was hitting 102. So we've seen 101 in games already, but he's hitting 102 in maxing, of course, that's a top, but like it's pretty absurd stuff. Grant Taylor, that was a great conversation, and someone that it's hard not to just get fired up about what Grant Taylor's doing right now. It's very interesting to see just kind of you know what he can bring to the table. So we'll see. And that bullpen is interesting. I really do believe that the bullpen is in a better spot than it's been in quite some time. And
Yeah.
you've got 6 guys just about locked in, even if Newcomb is kind of the opener maybe. And then from there, it's going to be really interesting. You're going to have at least one more lefty make it. It's still going to be I mean, you got Gilbert, Isert, Chris Murphy. Even Ryan Barucki is another guy that seems to be having some decently high praise in the organization. So at least one of those four, maybe both of those four, if not for Jedrickson Paez, who it's going to be an uphill battle for Paez. I will be honest. He's young. He just got into the game for the first time. He looked good the other day. He looked really solid in that outing, but just got his first game reps. It's interesting. I think it's going to be fascinating to see, and he's got an uphill battle. I will say that it's going to be tough for him to get enough going. He's sitting like 89, 90 in most bullpens right now. Like he's going to have to be elite with the command
Yeah.
and really show a level of maturity with his pitching that convinces the team to have him on the opening day roster because they love the long term upside. If there was a way to, if Paez is a guy that you were capable of stashing, like he's a borderline top 10 prospect in the system. I got to work on after being in spring training. I'm working on my my top 15 for JB, and like he's going to be in that top 15 and not 15 or 14. But like at the same time, you got to keep him on the roster all season. It's going to be a tough one. But either way, the bullpen is in a good spot, I think.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. It's just going to come down to how the rotation shakes out. I think that's going to be the biggest question is how that 5 spot turns out. Because if it is just Sean Burke or if it's just Eric Fetty, then yeah, you can carry Newcomb in the bullpen and you can maybe mix and match, maybe Brandon Isert, maybe Tyler Gilbert, who knows. But I think that while we're on the topic of Grant Taylor, an interesting point that got brought up to me, I want to say it was like either yesterday or the day before. I mentioned that he'd only thrown 115 innings across college, minor league baseball, and Major League Baseball. He'd only thrown 115 innings. And I was saying like, oh yeah, maybe durability could be an issue for him, or he's not going to be able to withstand a full season of work. But then somebody bounced back to me with the flip side of it. It's okay, he's only thrown 115 innings
Yeah.
in actual games, so he's got a lot of bullets left. Like it kind of makes sense. Like I can see both sides of the coin, but when you have an arm like Grant Taylor, you want to get as many bullets
Yeah.
out of that arm as possible, and getting him back to being a starter would be just fantastic because then you're dreaming of a top of the rotation of him, Tanner McDougal, Shane Smith, Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith. And like that's 5 right there. That can be your rotation in 2027 and beyond. Will that happen? I'm not sure, but that is a really fun five man rotation.
Yes, it is, my friend. It
Yeah.
definitely is. It's exciting to think about. A couple other pitchers to mention. I want to hit on the TJ guys real quick, just because we're working back from injuries. Kai Bush, I saw throw a bullpen. He is about halfway, even more than halfway through a 10-week bullpen progression. So most of these guys go through, for reference with the TJ, right? Usually there's 8 to 10 weeks of bullpens prior to facing any live hitters at all. So none of these guys of that group of prospects that went through TJ this time last year, none of them have faced live hitters yet at all. But Bush is about 6. Well, I was about to say it again. I think was about 6, maybe a little more than 6 weeks through his 10-week progression of
Oh,
bullpens, which means come April, he should be facing live hitters again. Prelander Baroa is in a similar spot where he's already throwing bullpens. He probably is a tad further behind where Bush is right now, but is a guy that it sounds like is going to be wanting to get into game reps by May potentially. Meaning there's
yeah.
another guy in the bullpen in Baroa that could be another high octane arm. I talked to I think Jordan Hicks mentioned like he was like I've never been in a bullpen with this many guys that throw 100 plus, and I was like it's probably a good point. I
Welcome to
don't think
modern
there's
day
that many.
baseball.
There's not that many. I mean, even in modern day baseball, dude, I don't know if there's that many bullpens where you've got
I
5 guys in a
I don't think
bullpen throwing
so.
100 plus. Like that's not super common. So,
Yeah.
an interesting thing to just a wrinkle to all of that, obviously. But it does sound like Baroa and Bush should be back in game reps by April into May. I think that you could look at like a June timeline for those guys to be potentially in the big leagues, or at least activated off the IL. And then even if they get optioned, right, they both have options left, so they could end up in that regard. Drew Thorpe is on a shutdown period right now from bullpens. He goes shut down around the middle of February for 3 weeks. He's still throwing. He's playing catch, but is not throwing bullpens right now. Didn't get much more information beyond that, so don't want to speculate too much. It seems like he's going to get back into bullpens here in the next week or two. Means he's a little bit back in trajectory though when you compare him to Bush, Baroa, and then Mason Adams as well, who I saw throw too. So Mason Adams is also throwing bullpens now as well. I think a tick behind where Bush is at, as in terms probably I'd guess like 4 weeks into that 10-week progression, maybe 5 weeks, but a little bit behind Bush, but still kind of progressing through his bullpens. Whereas Thorpe is not throwing bullpens right now. So we'll see what happens with the rest of those guys. I mean, I wouldn't factor any of those TJ guys though until at least June. It would be my guess. And I think the first one, at least back on the big league roster, will be Baroa because when the time is right, he will slide into this bullpen one way or
Yeah.
another.
Yeah, no, it's going to be really fun to see how they manage that back end of the bullpen because if you can figure out a way to get Prelander Baroa, Jordan Hicks, Jordan Leisure, Grant Taylor, and Sir Anthony Dominguez all throwing in the same game, like that's 5 innings of guys who are consistently pumping 100
Yeah.
plus mile an hour stuff like that. That's gross. So then you only need 4 innings of whoever is on the mound to start, and you got a pretty good nine
Yeah.
inning work of arms.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that Bush is probably the most likely one to be sort of like the next one up, just because I think Thorpe and Adams are going to be fighting for rotation spots when they come back. I think both of them
Right.
have that sort of starters build and starters like workload built up behind them. And then Bush, I think like if he goes to the bullpen, I feel like he can be a pretty good like 3-pitch lefty reliever. I mean, he's a big dude. He's like what 6'6", something like
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
the fastball, it's a cut ride fastball. We've seen the White Sox take a liking to guys who throw that cut ride fastball. And the changeup is there, the slider was there in the limited time that we saw him before he went down with TJ. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that Bush could be a lefty reliever in the mix. But yeah, I think Thorpe and Adams are definitely like maybe a step behind them, just because I think both of
No, I'd
them
agree.
can and will get stretched out and used as starters.
I think I would agree with that stance on that one. Flipping over to the prospect side, if that's cool with you, at
This
least
is
the
where
upper
we
level prospects, major league camp, and then we'll get into the niche guys. I mean, I got to start with Antonacci just briefly. I know we've talked about him a ton, but it
whew,
can't be understated how
what
much of an
just
uptick in impact with this guy. Like it's this is the player who we knew was going to be good, and I thought he was going to be a big league regular potentially last year, right? Based on his status of a guy that wasn't really going to have much power at all. Just left the stadium this weekend, it's just it's really cool to see a guy that just is already good at a lot of things and is getting better at the things he wasn't as good at, right? And that was clear from talking to Ryan Fuller, from talking to Paul Yanish, and a lot of the player development staff within the organization. Like he worked really hard to get better at the area that he was most efficient in. And that's just like a simple way to put it, but like it's the truth. And it's showing in spring. It's showing how much he hustles and his energy on the field. I mean, Venable talks about how impactful it is to have a guy who just never turns off when he's on the field
yeah.
and is just that kind of always go guy. Like I really think that I don't think I said yesterday after he hit that homer, like it's not crazy to consider opening day. Probably not going to be opening day. He's at the WBC right now. Whatever. You want to maintain that year of control. After April 15th, man, I don't think it's going to be very long. I really don't. I think he's going to make Charlotte quick work because he's good enough to. Like, if you told me Sam Antonacci was starting for the White Sox come April 27th, like, I wouldn't be surprised. I really wouldn't. There's a world where it's like April 16th. Like he has been that impressive, and he's been that talented, and just shown so much to the coaching staff. I think, I think he's the first position player call up this year, and I'm not sure anybody's even in contention for that role, that kind of spot now.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you, and I feel like he's been our guy since the day he got drafted, and to
Yeah,
just see like the national media sort of, I don't want to say
yeah, it's
like
kind of crazy, right?
heralding him, but like
Yeah,
we've known that this is what Sam Antonacci can be. We've known about him for about 18 months now. So to see him just sort of blossom into the player that he is
yeah.
going to be and is right now, it's really cool to see. I don't know if you listened to Russ Dorsey on 670 The Score earlier today.
Oh, did you mention
Apparently,
him?
apparently he was texting with some scout like over a year ago, like when Antonacci first got drafted, and he was like, "Yeah, from the second he steps off the bus to the second he gets back on the bus, it's go 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 go."
Yeah,
And he said that like of any prospect in the White Sox minor league right now, he said that Antonacci is going to have the longest career and have like a 12 to 15 year major league career, which like why can't he? Like it really does not seem
yeah.
that improbable for Sam Antonacci to have a very serviceable major league career and hit his way into being an everyday MLB regular.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I know somebody just mentioned in the chat. It's an interesting question. Antonacci's always going to be a guy that has a marginally higher ground ball rate than some other
Right.
hitters because he doesn't hit for power. Yeah. His swing is not tailored for power, but I don't think that's a problem. The thing with him is he's got plus speed, right? So when you got a guy that has plus speed and he's hitting the ball
Yeah.
very hard now in comparison, yeah,
And
you're going to get some
zero
ground balls,
zero
but
Ks
like
on the spring.
he doesn't whiff at all. I mean, he's not whiffing. He already didn't
Nope.
that much last year, but he's doing it even less now, right? So yeah, you're gonna live with some ground balls for a guy of that archetype who's gonna draw his walks, who's gonna whiff minimally, and who can run well. So if there's some grounders
Yeah.
in the grounders in the hole, right, he might beat a lot of those out anyways, right? In which case
I
you've
mean,
got a guy,
he
you know,
stole what, like 48 bases
48,
last year too.
48,
Yeah.
48 bags last year between high A and double A, or between the three
Yeah.
levels actually. So really exciting there. Braden Montgomery's the other one who stands out on the hitting side of just has had a good camp. He's not going to be. He's going to start in Birmingham. It sounds like. I think there's a slight chance he gets to Charlotte, goes straight to Charlotte, but I think he'll be in Birmingham and then go to Charlotte pretty fairly quickly after that. I think he'll be up this season. I don't think I would expect him until the second half of the year. I mean, he could tear it up. It's definitely possible, honestly. But I do think
Yeah.
Montgomery will be a little bit later on in the line. Then again, like there's nobody holding him back in the outfield right now. So
Right.
if he has a heck of a couple months, like it wouldn't shock me to see him get a June call up if he tailors his whiff a little bit and he gets into his groove. Like, it's not crazy to think about him just forcing the agenda come June or July. Probably it's post deadline. I mean, I think Austin Hayes is
Yeah,
like the most obvious flip candidate
that's
of
what I
all
was gonna
time. In
say.
which case, like, he probably just immediately replaces Hayes after the deadline. But you never know if Hayes
Yeah,
struggles, or even if Brooks or Acuna really struggle to kind of get their groove going. Like, there's a world where he pushes the agenda, and once he's deemed ready, like, Brady Montgomery is priority number one in terms of the outfielders in the organization. Another piece I still need to get through. I haven't had the time to write up, but I have some notes on that. Writing a little bit of like an outfield projection piece of what the outfield looks like going forward, and like, it's hard to determine the rest of the outfield, but one of the three spots will be Braden Montgomery's for 2027 and beyond. When he gets up this year, we'll see. But I do think, he looks very good out of the gate. He's impressing people with his work ethic and just how he goes about his business. And I think he'll be up sometime this year, and he will definitely be in the starting outfield come opening day next year.
did you get anything on where he would play in the outfield? Like, are they tailoring him to be more of a center fielder, right
I
fielder?
didn't get a ton on that. I still think, like, they've gotten him a lot of center field reps the past year. I
Yeah,
still think it's right field. I really do. I still
yeah,
think
the
he's a
arm is
plus
just
right fielder.
nutty.
The arm is great, and I think it takes one wrinkle out of his kind of equation where you're trying to kind of see if the defense can survive in center rather
Yeah,
than knowing the defense will be good in right. I think that's kind of I wouldn't be shocked to see him get some center field reps, and I think that could just depend on how Acuna and Baldwin look out of the gate, right?
true.
If
Yeah,
one of them really takes a big step, or both of them take a step and they look like legit center fielders, it takes the pressure off Braden to even have to play center field. If both those guys struggle, though, like, maybe that's the option. Maybe it's the answer
right.
if it's like, hey, you give him a shot at least because he's the best option you have there, right? So I didn't get a gauge of that, but I still think he's the long term, like, the starting right fielder for this team for many years to come. But it wouldn't shock me still if he does get some center field time out of the gate.
Yeah, no, I think that if he does end up in right field, it's because one of Acuna, Baldwin, maybe they go out and sign like a true center fielder. I'm not really sure there, but
Right.
I think that his just profile is better suited for right field. I mean, he's got
Yeah,
a
I'm with
cannon
you.
of an arm, and he can sort of, I don't want to say strike out more. Right fielders are usually where you get your big bop and power bats from, and
Right.
I'm not going to say that his bat would play anywhere on the diamond, but I feel like it's more prototypical right field oriented, like just hit homers, you can whiff a bit, you've got a big arm in right field, you're a good athlete. I feel like he's just the perfect right fielder. But again, his defense has surprised me in center field, and I feel like he's been playing more center field
Yeah.
more than I expected. I would have thought that he had already been shifted to a corner by this time in his
Right.
career. So the fact that he's even in center field is a really good sign to see, because if he can just carry that defense over to right field, that means he's going to be a very good MLB player for a pretty long time.
Right. No, I'm with you. I'm with you there. I'm with you there. On the pitching side of things, got to start with the big three, obviously, here in terms of pitching prospects, and then we'll work our way to some of the lower level guys because I'm excited to talk about some of these niche guys. And Ian and I talked about it, so everybody should go back and listen. We hit on some of the more niche guys too
Yeah.
earlier this week. But on the pitching side, with the trio of McDougal, Schultz, and Smith here, like, all indications are that Tanner McDougal is clearly the first starter up. I think he just has it's leapfrog is the wrong term because that makes it sound negative towards Schultz and Smith. It's not at all. I just think Tanner McDougal's development and the fact that he has been in the organization longer than both those guys, even though, yeah, he struggled his first year coming off of TJ, right? Like, he's had more ups and downs for sure. But I do think that given his longevity with the organization, given what he did last year, the innings are more built up. Like, he's going to be the first starter up. I think he's going to force his way. Again, it's going to be after that April 15th date. It doesn't sound like it'll be opening day. One of the interesting things with him, it's like, you never know though. Like, I could see a lot of different outcomes with him. Like, there's a chance that he goes the Grant Taylor route. I think it's possible that he gets kind of that early promotion, but as a reliever, just to ease him into the big leagues for now. And then he comes into next year as a starter, or maybe even later in the year he gets pushed into the rotation because of guys moving out. But I really just I would personally just have him let it fly as a starter, and like, the hot seat's on for some of the starters, right? It's like, if whoever in a month or two from now, like, whichever starter is not performing, like, Tanner McDougal's coming. I really do think that he is going to be a very solid mid rotation pitcher in Major League Baseball for a long time to come. The fastball looks really good. his signature curveball is always going to be kind of his bread and butter
Ridiculous.
pitch for him. It's a silly type of pitch. I mean, when you've
Yeah.
got 19 miles of separation between your curveball and your fastball, it's a pretty good recipe. But it's also just a pitch he's able to throw for a strike more than most guys can. With that deep of a curveball, it's usually hard to throw for a strike. He does it really well. Now he's got like not even a duo, but borderline trio of
Yeah.
sliders that
It's
is so
really
cool because
cool.
it's all the same pitch. That's the craziest part about it is he's talked about how like it gets tagged. He's getting tagged as a sweeper a lot. And he's like, I don't throw a sweeper. He's like, I've always thrown a slider, right? And like more of a direct, sharper slider. But he manipulates it and he fiddles with it. And his slider ranges from, 10 inches of glove side run to like 1 or 0 of that kind of more gyro, the sharper cutter version, right? He essentially throws the same pitch in the form of a cutter, slider, and sweeper. It's
Yeah.
very interesting, and that pitch has become a plus pitch, and it's borderline more effective than his curveball just because of the way he's able to manipulate it now. So it also decreases the pressure on him to have a changeup because he's able to modify three different variable different sliders into this kind of mold where he can mix and match it in different situations to lefties to righties. It's really cool. And Wolf pointed out too, it's true. It is Mike McDougal, Tanner's dad, was a guy that is a breaking ball guy and was for a while, and I think he's definitely learned some stuff from his dad as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's the first starter up, and I think it could be as soon as May. It's probably a little later than that. I am curious to see. Like, I think we've all kind of assumed it's going to be all in Charlotte for that trio of guys. I wouldn't be shocked to see McDougal in that Taylor situation where he does just go to Birmingham and then come straight up from Birmingham. It might be Charlotte just to get used to things, but I also like think it's possible they go the route of just like a month in Birmingham straight to Chicago for Tanner McDougal. So either way, though, like he's the first starter up from that group of three, and Schultz and Smith aren't going to be far behind, but I do think he's going to be up in the first, in May or June would be my guess.
Yeah, I would not be shocked if it's like the start of May for McDougal.
Yeah.
And I understand where you're coming from with the whole like, oh, is he a starter or is he a reliever? Does he go down the Grant Taylor role where he gets brought up to throw 2 innings he's used as the opener for like a Sean Burke, whoever. But I don't really think that Tanner McDougal has much left to prove in like the way in sort of like Grant Taylor didn't have any innings built up under him last year, and this was sort of a way to not waste bullets in the minor leagues. Tanner
Right.
McDougal threw what? It was like 120 something innings last year. It was around 120 ish. I feel like if he can take that next step to like 150, 160 this year, there's no reason why he isn't developed as a starter and brought up
Yeah.
as a starter. So I think that, I'm not saying that like he's going to be up on April 16th and, he's going to be pitching for the White Sox on April 16th. But, at the same time, I'm not sure that I don't think you can name 5 better pitchers on the 40 man right now that could be in contention for a starting spot without naming Tanner
Yeah.
McDougal as one of those 5. So I'm
I'm with
really
you.
excited to see when he gets called up because I think that's going to sort of like, I don't want to say set the tone for the rest of the year, but like if Tanner McDougal's up in like mid to late April, I think this team could be pretty fun because when you have an arm like that thrown every fifth day, I, again, I'm not saying that the White Sox are going to go 500, make the playoffs, but like there, when Tanner McDougal is thrown every fifth day, there's a
Yeah.
chance that the White Sox sneak into like a 79, 80 win range.
All right. I'm fine with that take.
Yeah,
Beyond McDougal, I got to give some flowers to Hagen Smith, man, and then we'll get to Noah Schultz after and touch on some other pitchers. In my opinion, Hagen Smith looked better than he's looked since the draft the other day when I saw him. And it's live ABs. You don't want to put too much stock in live ABs. I think that yeah, I don't love to be, it's, you're seeing backfield at bats. It wasn't even, it was 5 at bats, I think, against
yeah,
Jaden Fauski, who's just came out of high school, and Caleb Bonnemer, obviously, who is a high level prospect, but has only been at, high A. He hasn't pitched. He spent 11 games at high A. He hasn't faced an arm like Hagen Smith yet in the minors, right? So 2 lower level hitters at the end of the day, right? But Hagen Smith looked really good, man. He topped at 98.7. He was sitting 97 in that outing. And yes, it was 20 pitches, probably give or take. The biggest thing with Hagen Smith is the changeup looked very, very improved from what it was last year. I talked to him a little bit, and he kind of explained how killing the velo on it has been the biggest thing because he's been able to throw it in the past, and he just naturally throws it sometimes at like 92, which really isn't enough of a separation, and it ends up just as kind of a softer, a little bit
Like
more
sinker
arm side
esque. Yeah.
movement kind of run of his, yeah, and not quite a sinker because it's not as sharp as a sinker, but it just ends up as a little bit of a softer fastball that has some more run on it, and like that's not what he's trying to do. He needs a higher separation. So he talked about how he kind of wants that pitcher on 88 rather than 91, 92. And he's messed around with it. It's kind of this splitty changeup, right? And he's kind of just finding more feel for it. And he's starting to throw it more. He wants to throw it more. And he was like, he doesn't see it as something he needs to throw. You know, he talked about he doesn't really need to throw it against lefties. And it's never been something he needs to throw against lefties, but it has to be available against righties this season and more than it was last year. And it honestly looked really good. He had one swing that he made Bonnemer look, got Bonnemer way out in front on a changeup that was a very nice pitch. And then he just, the velo being up is good. And generally just looked good. The command was strong in some of those outings. Yes, it was 20 pitches of bats against, yeah, not putting tons of stock into that. But he looked really good, and I got to give credit where due. He looked good, and he sounds like he's come a long way with that changeup, which is going to be the big step for him. And it's we'll see what happens. Yeah, Ian just pointed this out. They're putting Jaden Fauske through the ringer. Jaden Fauske is basically facing like all the top prospect arms in live at bats right now, and it's like, here you go, kid. And it shows how much they value and see him as such an advanced hitter. But man, he's gotten some real tough assignments in spring training of the guys he's having to face on the backfield and everything. So a funny note there, but it was cool to see two of the top hitting prospects in the organization take on Hagen Smith, and Hagen Smith dominated them, frankly, and he should. Those are lower level hitters at the end of the day. But it's still good to see the velo numbers, the movement, and just everything that he's put together this offseason.
Yeah, no, the velo numbers are the thing that I'm looking at, and I'm going good, great, because
Yeah.
last year when it got bad for Hagen Smith, it was when he was consistently living in that 93 to 95 range, and if he's now sitting 97 and topping 98, like that is the Hagen
That's
Smith
a
that
one
you
inning
drafted.
spurt, right?
Eh,
So,
right, right, but
yeah,
the fact that the velo is even there on March, what was it? It was
yeah.
February 28th
February.
when you
Yeah,
saw him.
exactly.
Yeah. So like the fact that it's already there, it gives me a little bit more hope for him because maybe it's not as a starter. Maybe he can't get the walks under control, and you just fast track him in the Grant Taylor role where he's just an absolutely filthy left-handed reliever. And some scouts have said that like that's what he's going to be, even dating back to his college days. But if Hagen Smith can be that sort of 3-pitch starter and just a lefty funky arm slot, hides the ball really well, can get down the mound pretty good, that is what you drafted him for and paid him the most money of any left-handed pitcher ever in the MLB draft. That is a good sign. But again, it's only 5 at bats. It's 20 something pitches. We're not going to assume that Hagen Smith is going to be the next, who's a good hard throwing left-handed prospect right now. I don't think really many lefties
There's a
are
couple.
that hard
There's a
throwing.
couple, not that many, but I mean, Tolley, I
Yeah.
guess, is probably the easiest
Yeah,
example.
totally.
But
Connolly early.
yeah,
Early isn't that hard throwing, but yeah, no. The
Thomas White.
regardless. Oh yeah, Thomas White. He's probably number one right now in terms of
Yeah,
left-handed prospects.
yeah. But yeah, I think it was encouraging to see. And Noah Schultz as well was also fun to see. I think Schultz had a pretty good outing. He was facing some really good hitters in
Oh
Milwaukee. He
yeah,
faced a pretty disgusting lineup there, where it was like, oh man, I'm getting thrown into the wind, and it was funny to see.
struck out Jesus Mate.
So he had faced. You remember? So Madej, by the way, learned that recently. I don't know
Madej.
if you heard that one. It's
Oh,
Madej. It's interesting. That's going to be an interesting industry trend to figure out how quickly people get that one right, because it's going to be. I think people are
okay.
going to take their time with it, but it is Madej supposedly. But he faced Madej in the futures game and got hit around a little bit, Schultz. So this was kind of a revenge at bat for him. He had a beautiful strikeout in that outing. But
Yep.
even more important than the outing, it was interesting to see kind of just where he's at. Sounds like the changeup, as we know, is very similar. Different situation to Hagen. They're different profiles, but it sounds like the changeup is a big emphasis for Schultz as well. Getting it integrated more into games. Incorporating more of his four seam and his sinker, matching the two of them, utilizing both of them at their best of their abilities. The sinker is going to be more of a pitch to left-handers for him. I think the four seam up at the top of the rung is going to be something he can really unlock again against righties sometimes, right? I think in general Schultz is still figuring it out, but he looks healthy. He sounds healthy. He sounds like he's feeling really good going into the season, and that's the biggest thing for him. So encouraging stuff on the front of both those guys, and I think it's just going to be fun to watch those three. And Tanner had said like if it does end up being the three of them, and in the rotation together in Charlotte, like it's gonna be a rough week for hitters, and yeah, it's gonna
Yeah.
be for sure.
I do not
Not a,
envy
not a
I
fun
do
week.
not envy the international league when they have to face Tanner McDougal, Noah Schultz, and Hagen Smith on back to back to back days. Probably
Yeah.
that's probably their weekend starter. That's probably Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yep, that's not fun. That's not fun. That doesn't sound like a pleasant time. So, yeah, I think Schultz is in a good spot. I think he's in a. It seems like all three of them are in a good spot, honestly, right now at this point in spring. And then one other prospect on in big league camp to mention on the pitching side, I got to see David Sandlin throw some live ABs. He was working on live ABs to George Walkow and Ryan Galaney and Jared Kelnick, trio of at bats against David Sandlin, who looked good. The stuff was good. He was sitting around 98, 99. The off speed looked good. With him, the command is still, I think command's the biggest question for him in general. But he had some moments where he was really good. And then, I think he's in a spot that he's also going to be in Charlotte. That's another guy that probably might be part of that rotation as well in Charlotte, which is crazy. That is a ridiculous rotation. But he's a guy who's on the 40 man. And like, I think there's a chance that Sandlin, just given his more AAA experience than any of those other guys we mentioned, I think he's still behind like a Tanner McDougal in terms of his trajectory, but I don't think it's crazy to think that Sandlin, when he got to AAA last year, he was relieving most of the end of the year. I think. I think he could be a guy that also gets up this year, and even if it is out of the bullpen, I still think he's got a good shot to make his debut this season. And he looked good in his lives, and the stuff is starting to play up a little bit for him. So another guy that's just another young arm in the fold here.
Yeah, no, the White Sox have done a really good job with develop or just acquiring a bunch of
Yeah,
stuffed up guys in the past, like God, 3-4 years now. Where if even like two or three of them hit, and we're seeing guys like Christian Opper and Tanner McDougal, and to a certain extent, I mean, you knew that Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith were going to be the highly rated prospects, but I
right.
mean, you drafted Christian Opper and Tanner McDougal in the fifth round of their respective drafts. So like the fact that you took those guys, they were project guys out of high school for Tanner McDougal and then JUCO for Christian Opper. The fact that you took them, developed them, and now both of them are top 5 or 6 prospects in the White Sox system. It's great for the development of the White Sox just as a whole. If you can turn fifth round picks into top 100 prospects, you're doing something right. So maybe it's just the Brian Bannister golden touch with both of them. But no, I think that Sandlin is a name that I'm going to be looking at. It's just closer than I would normally view a prospect that was traded for another prospect, because I mean you got him for Gage Zeal, and maybe Sandlin was like the real prize of the Jordan Hicks deal, and you just had to eat Jordan Hicks's money to get David Sandlin. But yeah, no, I think that if he can come back, and not even come back, but like improve off of his 2025, where the control was hit or miss, the velo looked good in some, like, I want to say winter bullpens that he was throwing. I think he got up to like 101. I remember seeing a video of that. I don't know how reliable that gun was, because it was indoors and it was probably at his home facility where they might have ticked it up a little bit. But yeah, no, the fact that Sandlin is getting up to 99 this early is a really good sign for him.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I think it's good to catch up on that one. Running through a bunch of prospects. We're already at 52 minutes here because this is just fun stuff to talk about, and we love doing
Yeah.
so. So we'll have more to come. There'll be a lot more stuff coming out here in the near future. But running through a variety of prospects. Pitching side, I think Christian Opera I got to see. The stuff is ridiculous. He just looks good, man. I mean, I saw him face about 8 or 9 live hitters. 5 of them were strikeouts. The other one's pretty soft contact. Again, hitters that are not in the same tier of caliber as him, and Billy Carlson having to face Christian Opera, who he hit deep the other day, but Opera definitely got his lick back. 2 strikeouts on Carlson and the at bats that I saw. His stuff looks really good. He's already up pretty high 90s in terms of his velo. That he's working on tweaking with the slider a little bit. I think the changeup was very effective for him last year. It sounds like for him, it's just like the general philosophy of the left-handers, Brian Bannister left-handers who have 3 pitches, just being okay with having 3 pitches as long as their pitches are plus. It seems to be a trend here within some guys, and Opper fits that mold, right? It's a plus fastball, it's a plus changeup, it's a average, maybe above average slider that could get even better. Seems like he likes the movement on it, but Opper was talking to me about a little bit about kind of just how he's tinkering with the slider, trying to add a little bit more bite on it. Has worked on kind of spiking the slider at times and seeing how that works for it. It's a sweeper, right? But it's having a little bit more aggressive movement on it, as opposed to just the generic kind of the sweep he's at. So Um, I think he's in a really good spot. I would expect him to open the year in Birmingham. Honestly, I think there's a really good shot he just goes straight to Birmingham because he seems ready for that. And then we'll see what happens from there. The other pitchers that were interesting of note, Blake Larson, got to see him throw a bullpen. Man, is he funky! It
He's
is
weird,
funky, funky, funky. I'm sure everybody
weird
can go
stuff.
check out my Twitter video of Blake Larson's bullpen, just kind of what the motion looks like. It's real funky, man, and I think it's going to take some time. I know the org is going to be very patient with him. I think they're prepared for just kind of slow playing it, slow and steady. They're working on a little bit of arm path stuff with him, but I think with Larson, it's just like a fun projectable project where it's just an uncomfortable at bat. Like it is just it's a weird slot. It's super. It's almost sidearm. I mean, it's I don't even think you can
It
call it three
essentially
quarter. It's even
is
below
like,
three quarter.
yeah.
It's definitely lower than a three-quarter slot. So it's super interesting to watch him just get a bullpens in. Obviously, he hasn't faced live hitters at all yet. Still coming back. I expect him to face at least a month or two of just complex games before he even gets out to Kannapolis. But he will get to Kannapolis sometime this year, and it's just so funky and exciting to see. He's also just added some size. He's clearly even since
Yeah.
TJ last year. Like sometimes those things work out well where he does look like he's got a little more meat on his bones, and not a bad way. He was super lean coming into the organization, so definitely it was good to see him throw out there, and it was exciting. Another guy that impressed me on the pitching side, Gabe Davis threw in the minor league scrimmage on Saturday. He looked great. He struck out both Bonnemer and George Walkout in that scrimmage and looked really good. Well, Davis is a huge dude. I mean, he's 6'8", 6'9". He's a big dude. Moves well though. He's pretty fluid. I think he's an interesting guy where I'm curious to see if they try to work him as a starter or if they just go with the fast track reliever option. I think they could go the reliever option, and Davis is someone I think could move pretty quickly as a reliever, but also interesting to consider trying to have him start for a year and see what happens. So I was impressed out of the gate with him, though.
Yeah, no, Gabe Davis is another fifth round pick by the White Sox. And if history repeats itself, you got guys like Sam Antonacci, Christian Hopper, Tanner McDougal. Fifth round picks tend to work out well for the White Sox. So I'm holding Gabe Davis to a little bit of a higher standards than I normally would for a fifth round pick, just given his ancestors before him. But yeah, no, Gabe Davis, I feel like is a name that if he's healthy could really put his name on the map this year. And maybe it's in a relief role. I think that the White Sox would like it to be a starting role, but the stuff is there for Davis to be a very good bullpen arm. But again, when you have an arm like that, you want to get the most out of it, and the starting role is obviously where he got drafted from. So like if Davis can just be, I don't want to say like a everyday guy, or not even everyday guy, but like every fifth day guy, because most minor league rotations are 6 man. You got the occasional 5 man where somebody can start on Tuesday and Sunday, but no, if Davis can just come out and throw consistently every week and just go 4+ innings every week, then I think that he's going to really fly up the boards right now. I think I would have him like maybe towards the back half of my top 30, like around that 23 to 30 range. I could
Yeah.
see a little bit above that. Maybe I could see him off the list completely. But yeah, no, the other name, Blake Larson, I don't know, like his like leg lift is just so weird. It
It's
feels like
weird. It's funky, man.
it's
It's
it, it
funky.
it just seems like there's a lot of long levers moving at the same time. And that was an issue with Noah Schultz when he first got drafted, was how is he going to properly time up his arms and legs. And now look, he's a top 30 prospect in baseball, so the White Sox did well there. I'm not saying that Blake Larson is going to be Noah Schultz, but like he very well could be the next White Sox left-handed prospect that just turns out and is really good in the White Sox system. So I'm excited to see Larson. I wonder how much or how much of a workload he takes on this year, just given it's year one off TJ, and really just, I mean, it's his first year in professional baseball. Like he didn't have a normal, like, all right, you get drafted after your senior year of high school, you report to camp, and then you go to instructs. No, he took a year off, and like you were saying, he got bigger, and maybe that was sort of a blessing in disguise where he was able to put on weight and now he is throwing harder. I'm not sure what the velo was, but yeah, I'm really excited to see Blake Larson throw at any level this year.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to seeing him just get some reps, and whenever it gets out to that point. Matthias Lacombe is another one that I should hit on, and we just got it in the chat here as well. Got to see him throw a bullpen. I got to talk to him actually. It was cool to meet him and just kind of hear a little bit of his story. He's really deepening the arsenal. It's cool to see. He was very much a sinker sweeper guy through the past, through last year and late last year, it sounds like, but even more into this offseason. He's added both a four seam and a cutter. This is a guy who never threw a four seam. He was telling me he was like, he literally in his entire life has thrown just a natural two seam sinker as his fastball. And he's genuinely never thrown a four seam until like the past 6 months. And is now learning how to throw a four
Hey,
seam and a cutter as well. He was fun. He looked good in the bullpen. I mean, it was an early bullpen. It's only one of his first few bullpens of this offseason here, of the spring here. So definitely, I don't put too much stock into like early bullpens when he threw about 20 pitches, right? But he looked solid. He looked comfortable, and it seems like that Arsenal development for Lacombe is exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing kind of what that looks like. I think he's another one that'll be interesting to see. Like, he's probably going to open the year as a starter, but at the same time, like if that Arsenal is going, if the velo continues to trend in the right direction, he was up into the mid 90s last year. Like he has some of the better stuff of the lower level arms right now.
right.
But also is a bit older, right? So you could consider the possibility of just kind of fast tracking him. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the comb. But it was cool to finally meet him, but also just see what he looked like out there. Flipping to the hitting side, I got so many names, and we'll run through it quick. I don't want to take too much time here, but I want to go through some of these. So if you're hanging out with us for over an hour here, we appreciate you guys. First of all, I want to make sure that is very much known. We appreciate everybody that tunes into the show, and even getting to meet a couple people that I know listen to us in Arizona. It was super cool for me to get to have people that wanted to say what's up and everything. So always welcome to say what's up whenever you see me out at stuff or any of us, right? But yeah, it was there's a lot of bats to talk about here, man. The first one I got to start with is George Walkout because he just has taken a step in terms of his maturity as a hitter, in just terms of the way he's approaching the game, his patience at the plate. He was already starting to take a step last year, and we saw that. I think Walkout is going to lean in a little bit more to a three true outcome guy as he develops here, and I don't think he's going to quite be that, but I do think he understands a little bit more how important it is for him to just crush the ball when he finds the right pitches and not be swinging and chasing at certain things. I saw him in the backfields, man. Like I saw him take like five at bats. Two of them were homers. One of them was a line drive, like line out, like 100 plus 110 EV probably. Like that's a guess, but it just hits the crap out of the ball, man. He really does, and he had a couple strikeouts. I saw, of course, but like I can live with some strikeouts for a guy like that if he can at least lay off more of the breaking stuff and really crush heaters because that's where he makes his money, man, is crushing those heaters. So he looked good, and reports from the organization is that he's just come out of camp strong and good and making better decisions at the plate and just putting himself in a position to really take a step forward. I think he'll have a good shot to open up in Winston as opposed to Kannapolis, even though, last year's numbers weren't great. I still think he's taken a lot of the right steps in his development.
Yeah, and the thing with Walkow is he just turned 20. Like, if he had gone to college and was going through the MLB draft, he would be draft eligible this year. Like,
Yeah.
he would be draft eligible and would be going into a minor league system this year, this August. So the fact that he has two years of minor league baseball under his belt and has sort of, I don't want to say gotten the lay of the land because there's been ups and downs for Walkow, but the fact that he's gotten two minor league seasons of work and of minor league pitch of facing minor league pitching, that's better than going to college for 2 years or 3 years, sorry, and just feeding off of lower tier arms than what you would see in low A. So I just something about it, his game tells me that this is the year where either A, everything clicks, and this is like the George Walker that you dreamed about seeing when you drafted
Yeah.
him, and you gave him $1 million in the seventh round, or this is where he starts to slip and fall off prospect boards. So the thing with him is you just got to be patient. I've been preaching patience with him for the past 2 years, like ever since he got drafted. So I don't know. I feel like this is a year where George Wolkow either breaks out or starts to slip. And my money is I'm going for the breakout because I feel like he's way too smart and just way too good of a player to just lose everything like that before he even turns 21.
No, I'm with you. I think there's a lot to like with him this season. I think it's going to be a really fun guy to keep an eye on. And he looked great. He looked great in spring. He's got the little goatee going. I think that's going to take him in the, give him a little extra seasoning on that. So we'll see what happens. But I think he looked really good. A lot of draft guys that are pretty much the whole draft class is at camp already, right? So for reference, right, when I was there, it's still it's minor league early camp, right? So it's not the whole farm system. It's only about a quarter to a third of the farm system that's there right now, and kind of early camp. It's pretty much the entire 2025 draft class, and then a variety of other prospects, either guys coming off injury or some higher end prospects like Walkow and some other guys that are there to just continue to hone in on stuff. Draft class hitters like it's exciting, man. I mean, Billy Carlson, the defense is ridiculous. We knew that already, but like I'd never seen it in person, and it's just like the hands
Yeah.
are just so unbelievably smooth. He is just, I mean, he makes some of these college guys, infielders, like respectfully look just not that good, even though they are good because he's that good. And he's just really smooth. And the swing is going to take some time. I know I talked to some guys about it. Like there's obviously things that he's working on, but he had some really nice swings. Yeah, the pop is clear. The bat speed when he gets a hold of some, he really can crush the ball. And he had a couple really nice BP shots where I was like, man, he's getting some juice there, seriously. But the hit tool is going to take some time. Great defense though. Fauski, like I said, he faced a lot of really high end pitchers when I was there, so he definitely got he struggled a bit in some of those at bats, but like that's not a negative at all. I think if anything, it's a positive, right? Interesting to see the other draft class guys, Anthony DePino and Colby Shelton, both kind of older college guys who are hitting the ball really well this spring. Got some pretty strong reviews from the organization just about how advanced they are as hitters in general. That was cool to see. That's kind of the other draft guy, Eli Brown. Eli Brown, he looks really interesting. This was a guy who was kind of a bit of a sleeper coming out of the draft, and a guy that was draft eligible sophomore. So there was some interesting kind of energy there of what it could be, a little bit more projection, I think, than some of the other, older draft picks. Bat to ball last year shined in Kannapolis, but he's definitely put on some juice and some weight, I think, where his pull side pop, his ability to kind of air pull was really strong. Some of the at bats I saw him taking, and some of the BP swings I saw him take, like he was really hitting the ball well from the left side to right field, particularly for a guy that's contact oriented, being able to really kind of get into a little more pull side power than I expected is a great sign for him heading into the year.
Yeah, no, I think that Eli Brown is going to be one of the more, I don't want to say polished bats in like the lower minors for the White Sox this year, but like he was, I think, didn't he win conference player of the year for
Yeah.
whatever conference Mercer is in? I think so.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, I'm really excited to see what Eli Brown can bring to the table because he's been James Fox's guy ever since he got drafted,
Yeah.
and he seems to really be in on him. And I think that when one of us likes a player or just like has
Mhm.
like a keen eye, I feel like it kind of works out for the better. So I'm excited to see Eli Brown, and I think that Colby Shelton could, I don't want to say put his name back on the map because I don't like to judge players based off their draft year because again it's the longest period of time that they're going to be playing baseball for their entire career. So I'm not going to put too much stock into his 2025 season, but it wasn't good. Like I think he batted like 115 something like that and struck out a ton. But I mean, if he can come back and do what he did best at Florida, which was hit, like he's going to be pretty good. And
Yeah.
I don't know if people saw the weight room picture of him. I don't know if that even was him, but like if that's him, he is jacked. He's huge.
Yeah, he looked big. I don't know if he looked that big, but he
Yeah,
did look like he's got some weight on him. He was also playing all over the infield. I saw him getting reps at second, short, and third. So a guy that's
yeah.
versatility is going to be useful at least in the minor league levels. I expect this year. Aside from some of the draft guys, a handful of names. Oh, the other draft guy I actually need to mention is Matthew Boughton. Matthew Boughton being the last high school pick. I got to meet both. I got to talk to both Boughton and Landon Hodge as well. The two other prep guys, along with Carlson and Fauski from this past draft. Hodge is going to be in Arizona most of the year. He's going to take some time for sure. Definitely some fun swings out there, but I think he's the guy that's going to take a little bit more time and energy to develop behind the plate. Especially, it takes a lot of time for high school catchers sometimes to get his kind of groove going. But Matthew Botton's an interesting one. This is a guy who's a pretty unique draft pick and someone that, our interviews at Sox Fest with Paul Yanish, he kind of detailed just kind of who he is and what his trajectory has been. It's very unique, but he's fun. I think there's a lot of guys who view him in the organization as kind of this long term molding block there. The athleticism was very clear to me. He stole some bags in the scrimmage. The defense he was playing, I only saw him play middle infield. I know we've heard that he's getting some outfield reps as well, but I've only seen him play. I only saw him play both second and shortstop, at least the time I was there. But it seems like he's going to get some center field reps as well. Definitely an athlete for sure. Very clear that he's an athlete and can move. But I think it's going to be a little bit of a slower process with the offensive side of the game for him. But someone I think is going to be a pretty interesting name to follow. And then a number of hitters on the international side, man. But well, we got to start with your guy Javier Mogollon,
Love it.
Mogo as he's called. Dude, I mean, I just like don't know if I could have imagined the amount of opposite field power for a guy that's like 5'6", right? Like this is a small dude. Mogollon is he keeps getting referred to by a lot of people, as like this like pound for pound, he's one of the most talented players in the organization. And like I get that. And I still have to think back on that and try to like conceptualize what that really means because the dude can play. Like he can just flat out hit, and he's very athletic and he moves well. But like I just like the power is pretty insane. He was going opposite field out of the park in BP. Like half of his swings within a round of BP were like homers to right field for a guy that's a 5'6" right-handed hitter. Like it's pretty ridiculous. He's gonna play second base. He's not gonna play much more of anywhere else. I think from now on. But like you can throw around the whole Jose Altuve idea, and like, yeah, it's an aggressive comp, and he's not going to be Jose Altuve, I don't think. But it's
He
really
might,
fun, man.
but
It's really fun, and there's a lot of people very excited about a full season of Mogollon this season, and hopefully he's healthy because he should get some shine this year, and I think there's room for him to really take a step forward and establish himself among the better hitting prospects in the lower levels.
I was just stunned to see how much good hype Mogollon had coming into spring.
Yeah,
Even when you were there, even before you got there, like Mogollon is a name that like I sort of just like threw a dart at the dartboard like 2 years ago when he was in the Dominican Summer League, and maybe it ends up working. I don't know. The Dominican League dart throws can be fun. They can be fun when it hits, and Mogollon still has not even made it out of Canapolis yet, so we're still a long ways away until the baby Jose Altuve comps come to fruition. But like, there's not many other players who can match Mogollon's stature and just power. Like, I'm struggling to find anybody else who can even like muscle balls out to the opposite field when they're 5'6", 5'8" in cleats, maybe. Like it's just a really fun profile for Mogo, and I'm excited to see what he can do over a full season in 2026 for
yeah.
sure, because he's got some tools.
No, I'm looking forward to it. It was fun to watch his BP rounds, man. I mean, he's going in there with guys that are a foot taller than him, and he's hitting just tank after tank, and in opposite field power, and really able to elevate the ball. He's really able to get into the pole. He got into the pole more last year, which is interesting because he got
Yeah,
into his pole side, but then I see him now just hitting bombs the opposite direction, and it's like, all right, if he's got all fields type of power for a guy of that size who it's a very quick, compact swing, and like it's interesting. It's interesting to say the least. I'm excited to see kind of what he looks like. A number of other international guys, and then we'll wrap because this is maybe our longest episode of the offseason, but it's deserving. I spent 4 days doing
yeah.
nothing but watching these guys play, so it's worth talking about. But the name that is all of a sudden a name that I'm kind of obsessed with and dove into some swings on. Arm Layton was able to get me some video, so I got to watch a little bit more of what his swing looked like last year in comparison to what his swing looks like this spring. Jose Mendoza. For those who don't know, 17-year-old catcher from the DSL last year. I had heard the name. Don't get me wrong. Like I knew he was on the DSL roster, and I remember that I knew like the name, and that was just about it. Jose Mendoza is getting a lot of buzz. He's getting a lot of buzz for sure here for a guy who is 17 years old, coming a Venezuelan, coming over from the DSL. Last year in the DSL, he had a 116 WRC plus. He had an 817 OPS, and he was good in the DSL. But DSL numbers, not a ton to put in there. The interesting thing with Mendoza is he is huge. He's a big dude. He's got some serious pop. Some of his BP swings, like he was putting balls as far as like just about anybody that I was watching in some of these rounds of BP within the minor league camp. In addition to that, it sounds like he has a lot of upside as a catcher. It seems to me, and from this is just from word of mouth and from talking to guys, like it sounds like his arm strength behind the plate is like as good as any catcher in the organization, which is saying a lot for a guy who's 17. Obviously, the technical side of catching is going to take some time with him. He's very young. He's only caught 10, 20 professional games at this point or something like that, right?
Right.
Like it's going to take a little while. But with that said, I was super impressed by some of the swings from Mendoza. It's an interesting, he kind of starts with his hands a little out in front of him and then kind of has this like slow, steady kind of his first movement is really interesting because he goes from this like hands are instead of being back, his hands are kind of up here, like in front of him almost, and then has this initial move and then a pop. And it's kind of this like gather step almost. And it's very unique. And I think it's toned down a little. It was a little more drastic last year. And I think the organization has kind of toned down his pre-gather a little bit because it was a little bit too movie maybe at times from some of the swings
Right.
last year. A ton of raw power, very good arm strength. It sounds like they really like the projection of him as a catcher, even though it's going to take some time. He comes over from the DSL. He's going to be in the complex this year. He's probably going to be splitting catching duties between him and Landon Hodge at the complex league this season. Jose Mendoza debut at 18 this year in Kannapolis is not impossible. I'll put it that way. 18-year-old catcher reaching Kannapolis is exciting, and
Yeah.
it's possible. I'm not going to throw the comps out there. I have a couple names in my mind. I'm not going to go there,
I know where
but
you're
I
going.
do think I know you know where I'm going,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to go there. But I do think this is a name to keep an eye on for those prospect people that like diving real deep into the system. It sounds to me and it looks to me, even just from watching him for a little while, that this is definitely a name from the recent international class to keep an eye on here this season.
Yeah, no, I feel like if Mendoza can develop into more of just a hitter and not just like somebody who can hit, but just like a true hitter and knows how to go the other way for a single and working at bat, that's what's going to really set him out as like cream of the crop
Yeah,
levels of good young catcher in the White Sox minor league system. So I'm excited to watch, or not even watch, but just to see what that Arizona team can do. Because I mean, Landon Hodge and Jose Mendoza, that's pretty fun. That's a pretty
yeah,
fun duo of catchers, and it's
right.
just like the White Sox in the big league club. Two good catchers is not a bad thing to have.
Yeah, one more guy to mention on the kind of international young guys level. Someone that I do think will be in Kannapolis this year at 19 years old. Marcelo Alcala is another one who hit a ball to the moon in a scrimmage game. He hit an absolute tank in the backfield scrimmage I watched on Saturday. I had seen some swings of him, and like he had a good year last year in the complex to an extent. Definitely some high whiff numbers. 63 strikeouts across 43 games at the complex last year. Gonna need to curtail that for sure. Definitely, it's a big swing. It's a big movement. But the raw power is pretty nutty for Alcala. He can tap into some stuff. Another guy from Venezuela like Mendoza. Just another name to kind of keep an eye on there. I think he probably maybe he's in the complex start the year, but he's 19 already, so I could definitely see him going straight to Kannapolis and being kind of a rotating starter in Kannapolis this season. He hits the heck out of the ball, but some clear whiff there, some clear deficiencies, but at least a name that I was intrigued by, and it's always fun seeing guys hit, no doubters in a scrimmage, right? It was one of those swings where it was like nobody flinched, like the outfielders didn't move. It was one of those types of swings. Those are fun to see. So Alcala is a name that could be in Kannapolis this year at a pretty young age and has got some serious juice.
I'm really excited to just watch all of the White Sox, or not even newer White Sox international signings, but just like
Yeah,
ever since Marco Patti left, I feel like there's been a lot more of just guys who are making a name for themselves in the lower levels and then sort of actually moving up towards the major leagues, and they're continuing that. And
right.
I believe I tweeted something out when Marco Patti first got fired. It was the only two signings that he made in his tenure with the White Sox, who he signed and then they developed into MLB players. It was Lenyn Sosa and Brian Ramos. I believe that's it. I could be wrong, but I feel like this current group of White Sox international scouts, I feel like David Keller has them looking at the right guys and identifying the right guys for the organization, because I don't know. I feel like I wasn't really tapped into Dominican white. I wasn't tapped into all this when Marco Patti was at the height of the last rebuild. So I'm not sure. It feels like there's been a lot more international guys that have come over and really put their name on the map. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong there.
Yeah. No, I don't think you're wrong. I think there's a lot more international juice in the organization than there has been at times, and I think there's these names like yeah, I'm saying these names and I might be
Far
bullish on
away.
them because of course there's a lot of things that can happen. Most of these guys you mentioned may never make the big leagues, but it's interesting. And I'm talking to people, I'm getting some ideas from guys in the organization, and also just watching and like there's some things that like you can look at the eye test, and when you see Jose Mendoza put a ball on the third rung of the batter's eye, dead center, eh, you look at that and you say, okay, I'm going to pay attention to this guy going forward. Like that,
Right.
those are names you're going to look for, right? Like sometimes it's that simple, right? Like you see a guy put a ball 450 dead center, you're going to pay attention to them a little bit. So those are those things you just keep an eye on there. We've been hour 20 here. So anybody that stuck with us, you are amazing. We
Long
really
show.
appreciate the
Yeah.
support of everybody. This has been a long one for sure. Another shameless plug here. I've got 4 articles up and two or three more coming just from all of my various conversations, interviews with players, stuff like that on justbaseball.com. You can find all my written work there. Make sure you're following along with at Future Stocks. Dylan is at Not Cease on X. I am at Elijah EV8. We're going to have a ton of content coming up. We still got more stuff. Our guy Jeff Cohen will be at spring training next week, I think. And then James Fox is going to be out there for a couple days as well in a couple weeks. For those mentioning, by the way, I want a quick note because I just saw it in the chat too before we wrap up here. Backfields are accessible, guys. You can't get quite as close as where I'm at when I'm filming these videos, but like backfields are accessible in Arizona. If you don't know how to get there, shoot me a text. I'm happy to explain it to you. You go along the backfields, you go past the little pond by the Dodgers complex where there's 1,000 million fans that are really annoying, and then you find your way and you go through this little path, and there's 4 fields with bleachers and everything you can sit at. It's 95% White Sox staff and maybe Elijah and a couple other people, but it is really cool. So you can check that stuff out. You can't get quite up to the fence in certain ways, but you can be there behind a gate and watch some of this stuff on the backfield. So definitely encourage people that are going to spring training to check it out. It's a super cool experience. That's enough yapping. Aside the point, definitely make sure you're following along with us. We've got so much more to come. We've got more spring training content. We've got some interviews coming up, and then once we get into the season, we'll have minor league updates and highlights and all that stuff every day. So it'll be fun.
Yep, it's going to be a really fun season for the White Sox, and I cannot wait to just cover it with you. And we're going to give all of you guys a really fun season, and I'm promising all of you that.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening so much, and we'll talk to you next time on the Future Sox podcast.